Imagine for a second that you earned $1 million. That's great, right? The problem though is if that money's being taxed as ordinary income, it means you're paying up to 37% or about $370,000 of that $1 million in taxes. And if you live in a state like California, you're having to pay up to an additional 13.3% in state taxes, which means in total, you only get to keep around 49.7% of your $1 million or about $497,000. This means that a majority of your hard-earned money is being taken because of taxes. But what if there was a way for you to completely avoid paying taxes? This means instead of you giving away half of your $1 million fortune to the government, you're keeping 100% of it. I'll take that back now. Thank you very much. Well, as you probably already guessed, there is a way to do it, and it's by using a Roth IRA. So a Roth IRA is a type of individual retirement account that lets you invest money into the stock market and have that money grow completely tax-free. And of the dozens of different investment account options that you have available to you, the Roth IRA is the only account that has this benefit. And so in today's video, we're gonna talk about exactly how the Roth IRA works, the requirements for opening one, and then how you can actually open one up yourself, what to actually invest in within your Roth IRA to grow your account from 0 to 1 million, and by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how you can retire a tax-free millionaire, even if you're starting with 0. And so first things first, let's really quickly talk about how exactly the Roth IRA works. And if you could really quick, do me a huge favor and drop a like down below for the YT algo. And if you do that, then I'll appear in your dream tonight and I'll grant you one wish, but you have to comment what your wish is down below so that I actually know what it is and I can grant it for you. So the way a Roth IRA works is you take your after-tax income, which is the money that you've already paid taxes on, and you put some of that income into your Roth IRA to then be invested. And then once that money is in your Roth IRA, you actually choose your investments, which we'll talk about soon. After that, any interest that you earn from your investments growing will grow completely tax-free. And the reason your money grows tax-free inside of the Roth IRA is because remember, that money was already taxed going into the account. For example, if you work a W-2 job, when you get paid, taxes are already being taken out of your paycheck. And here's an actual example. So you start out and you've got your gross income. This is the income that you're receiving before any deductions are taken out. And deductions are these items over here: taxes, taxes, and more taxes. And if you have medical insurance through your job or a 401k, those items could show up here as well because they're being deducted from your gross income. Okay, so you've got your federal income tax, your social security tax, Medicare tax, and in most cases, a state tax. Although there are several states like Florida, Tennessee, Texas that don't have a state income tax. And all of these deductions are deducted from your paycheck every single pay period, which then leaves you with your net income, which is how much you're actually taking home after it's all said and done. And this net income is considered the after-tax income, meaning that Uncle Sam and his good friends at the IRS have already taken their cut. And so when you invest your money into a Roth IRA, you're investing some of the after-tax or the net income. Now, how much of this money that you invest is gonna be up to you. The maximum that you can contribute into your Roth IRA every year is $6,000 and $7,000 if you're over the age of 50. And it is highly recommended that you try your hardest to max out your Roth IRA every year. For most people, this means investing $500 every month for 12 months, which equals $6,000. And because the average person in the US starts investing at the age of 29, this gives the average person about 36 years to invest. And so if you could invest $500 per month into a Roth IRA at about an 8% average return adjusted for inflation, after 36 years of investing, your wealth would grow to about $1.2 million in your Roth IRA thanks to the power of compound interest. And compound interest really is the magic here. You see, it's not enough to save $500 per month in your savings account. You actually have to be investing that money for it to grow. If you saved $500 per month for the next 36 years, you would have saved about $216,000. However, after the average 3% inflation per year, that $216 would only be valued at about $74,000. But if you were instead investing that $500 per month, well, as you saw from earlier, even with the 3% inflation, your money would still grow to $1.2 million because of compound interest. And compound interest is the interest that you earn not only on your original money, but also on the interest earned from your original money. And so you invest your money and that money earns interest. And then more interest is earned on your original money plus the interest on the original money. And then more interest is earned on top of all of that, and then even more on top of all of that, and on and on and on. And this right here is compound interest. And it's the reason why your money is able to start growing so fast if you're able to invest long enough and consistently enough. I'd like to take a few minutes now and talk with you guys about what exactly are the requirements to open up a Roth IRA. For starters, you have to live in the US. If you don't live in the US, check to see if there's any Roth IRA equivalents in your country. For example, I know that the TFSA or the tax-free savings account exists in Canada, and it's basically the same thing as the Roth IRA, if not better. Next, only earn income that's been reported to the IRS is allowed to be contributed into the Roth IRA. And so, for example, if you're working a job and they're paying you under the table and none of that income is being reported to the IRS, then you can't go and invest any of that money into your Roth IRA. Your earned income has to either be equal or more than what you're contributing into your Roth IRA. For example, if your earned income is $3,000 for the year, then you can't contribute more than $3,000 into your Roth IRA. And the next rule is, believe it or not, if your income is too high, then you're not actually allowed to make any direct contributions to a Roth IRA. If you file taxes as a single person, then your modified adjusted gross income can't be over $144,000 in the year 2022. And if you're married and filing jointly, your gross income can't exceed $214,000 in 2022. However, there is actually a loophole called a backdoor Roth IRA or a Roth IRA conversion that allows you to still invest money into a Roth IRA even if your income limits exceed the IRS's maximum income limit. And we'll talk more about what that is and how exactly you can do it at the end of this video. Now, when it comes to setting up your Roth IRA, it's actually a very easy process. First, you need to actually find a broker that offers Roth IRAs. Some of my personal favorite are Fidelity, Vanguard, Charles Schwab, Webull, and M1 Finance. Opening a Roth IRA is going to be very straightforward at any of these brokers. For example, with Fidelity, you would just go to fidelity.com, click on open an account, and then click on the button that says open now underneath the Roth IRA option. And then from there, you just go through the entire application process. With Vanguard, you would just go to vanguard.com and then click on personal investors, click on open new account at the very top of the website, and then click on start new account. From here, it's going to ask you a few very basic questions before you land on this overview page here, which is going to walk you through step by step how exactly to open up an account with Vanguard. And then when you click on the button that says continue opening an account, from here, you'll actually be able to choose your account type. And then if you want to open up a Roth IRA, you would just choose retirement investing and then click on Roth IRA. And then once you click on continue, you'll just go through the entire application process just like you would with Fidelity. And I could go through this with every single broker, but you get the point. The biggest thing that you'll want to consider, in my opinion, when choosing a broker is the user interface. Virtually every broker will give you access to invest in the same exact investments, will offer zero commission trading, and will be nearly identical in every aspect except for the user interface. With the older, more established brokers like Fidelity, Vanguard, and Charles Schwab, the user interface tends to be a lot more clunky and just outdated. And some people really don't care about this because they're investing long term and they don't even use their broker on a daily basis. But some people do care a lot about this. And for those people who want a more clean, modern user interface, I would recommend going with a modern broker like M1 Finance or Webull. And then once your Roth IRA is set up, it's time to actually decide which you'll invest in within the account. A lot of people will try to overcomplicate this entire process. They'll make it seem like you have to be some professional stock picker with years of experience before you can actually begin investing in the stock market. But I promise you, it does not take an expert to invest successfully in the stock market. In fact, even if you're a complete beginner who has zero experience investing, you're brand new to investing, you can still easily invest in the stock market and get wealth building returns. And you do this by investing in diversified, low cost, broad market ETFs. Examples of this include VOO or the Vanguard S&P 500 ETF. This ETF invests in the entire S&P 500 index, which means it contains 500 of the largest companies in the US. And so when you invest in shares of VOO, it's basically like you're investing in 500 of the best companies in the US, all just from simply buying shares of one single ETF. Another great ETF is VTI or the Vanguard Total Stock Market ETF, which invests in the entire US stock market and holds over 4,000 different stocks. And so if you want maximum exposure to the entire US stock market, then you would invest in this ETF. Or if you wanted to go super broad, you could invest in VT or the Vanguard Total World Stock ETF, which invests in over 8,000 different stocks from companies around the world, including the US. I talk about all these ETFs in much greater detail in my video about the only ETFs you'll ever need to invest in. And so if you have questions about these investments and you want to learn more about them, I'll include a link to this video in the description below for you to watch after you finish watching this video. And if you want a step-by-step tutorial on how exactly to buy these investments within your Roth IRA, I don't want to spend too much time on that in this video, but if you watch this video here, which I'll leave in the description below, that's going to walk you through step-by-step how exactly to start buying investments within your Roth IRA. Let's talk about some of the most important Roth IRA rules. These are things that you absolutely must know about your Roth IRA, otherwise you risk losing a lot of money in fees and other penalties that are typically associated with the account. And the first rule, although it's definitely not recommended, is that you are allowed to withdraw your original contributions within your Roth IRA. Now, what you can't do are withdraw the capital gains or the investment gains until you reach the age of 59 and a half. And so, for example, if you put $1,000 into your Roth IRA and then a year later, that $1,000 turns into $1,500, $500, that means you have a $500 investment gain, and that $500 cannot be taken out of the Roth IRA until you reach the age of 59 and a half, otherwise you'll have to pay penalties and taxes on it. With that being said though, the IRS does make a few exceptions to this rule, and the first exception is that you're allowed to withdraw up to $10,000 from your Roth IRA to buy your first house. You're also allowed to take money out for qualified education expenses, health insurance premiums if you're unemployed, any disability related expenses, and you're allowed to withdraw up to $5,000 per year after having a baby or adopting. Now, of course, I would highly recommend that you avoid taking any money out of your Roth IRA, unless of course you want to completely destroy your long-term investment gains. Compound interest can only work if you leave the money in your account alone and allow the interest from your investments to continue stacking and compounding over and over again. But if you're constantly pulling money out of your Roth IRA, not only do you risk having to pay penalties and fees, but you're also going to stunt the growth of your account because you're never giving compound interest a chance to truly start compounding. Another very important rule is the Roth IRA's 5-year rule, which says once you turn 59 and a half, you're not allowed to make tax-free withdrawals unless you've had your account open for a minimum 5 years. Say for example that you didn't open up your Roth IRA account until you were 60, and then you turned 63 and you said to yourself, well, Joshua Mayo from YouTube said that I can start making tax-free withdrawals once I turn 59 and a half. And since I'm 63 right now, then technically I should be allowed to make tax-free withdrawals, right? But not so fast, because the Roth IRA's 5-year rule applies to anybody at any age. It doesn't matter if you're 65 or 105. You have to have the account open for a minimum 5 years after 59 and a half to be able to start taking money out tax-free. Now, fortunately for most of you watching, this rule is not going to affect you because you're not going to wait to start investing in your Roth IRA when you're in your 90s. And speaking of waiting to invest in a Roth IRA, it's worth mentioning that there are no age restrictions for opening up a Roth IRA. For example, believe it or not, a baby that was born 1 second ago can legally open up a custodial Roth IRA under their parent's supervision. As long as that baby has earned income, you as the parent can invest that money into their Roth IRA for them, and if their parents were consistently investing $500 per month into that baby's Roth IRA, by the time that baby reached 30 years old, they would already be a millionaire. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, Joshua, how can a baby have earned income? That doesn't make any sense. Perhaps you take pictures of your baby for your business, right? And you pay them $500 per month to use their pictures. And as a result, that baby technically does have earned income that they can then invest into their Roth IRA. And the last thing that I want to talk with you about is a backdoor Roth IRA. Like I talked about earlier, the Roth IRA has income limits, and if you exceed those limits, then you're not going to be allowed to contribute into your Roth IRA. However, by using a backdoor Roth IRA, or sometimes it's called a Roth IRA conversion, you can still legally contribute into a Roth IRA and take advantage of those lovely tax-free gains. The way it works is very simple. So instead of you contributing directly into a Roth IRA, you instead contribute into a traditional IRA, and then you convert that traditional IRA into a Roth IRA. Now, it's important to mention that when you do a Roth IRA conversion, you're going to have to pay taxes when the money converts over from the traditional to the Roth IRA. However, the backdoor Roth IRA doesn't mean that you're paying extra taxes when you convert, right? You're still paying the same amount of taxes because when you first deposit money into your traditional IRA, you're depositing pre-tax dollars, meaning that money has not been taxed by the IRS yet. And so when you convert the traditional to the Roth IRA, that's when it's taxed. Hey, if you have not already dropped a like down below for the YT algo and subscribe to the channel, I would appreciate you so much if you did both those things. You guys are truly amazing. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day or night. And as always, I will see you again very soon. Take care.